Hello and welcome to I Am Geek. This is episode 231. I'm Catron and I'm joined by my good pal Chris.
Got it.
Ryan is under the weather, so it's just Chris and I taking the helm again. We hope Ryan feels better soon.
We really do. We're not just
we
saying
really
that.
do. Yeah. So I hope you stick around. We're gonna have a fun time tonight. We've got an episode of iamLegend for you. And we've got a really cool show, but I want to tell you about next week. You want to be back? Ryan will be back next week, so you'll hear his golden voice. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say golden voice, but anyways, I did anyways. But he'll be back for a very special episode of I Am Disney when we're joined by Sarah and Steven of the YouTube channel Princess and Scoundrel. If you're not familiar with the Princess and Scoundrel, it's because it's a new YouTube channel. They just started in November. Nice. And their channel's dedicated to all things Disney and Star Wars. They love Disney and love Star Wars, just like us. They recently took a trip on the Galactic Star Cruiser. I think they went with Dano, if you're familiar with the Dano channel. So you'll want to come back next week, see us on the live stream on YouTube or listen to the podcast, and it will be a lot of fun.
It's awesome because I am both a princess and a scoundrel in one, so it'll be fun to talk to both of them.
Yeah. That will be interesting. So, all right. Well, tonight we've got, again, another I Am Legend episode where we take deep dives into things that are legends. Maybe it's a cryptid or it's a something that happened in the past. So we're taking a trip to a faraway land, not in space, but we're in a very cold area, a very cold continent, actually, of Antarctica. So if you've been watching the news or a history geek or you watch the History Channel, you'll know that that we're talking about the Endurance. There's a episode that's on the History Channel of History's Greatest Mysteries, and they did a documentary about a crew that went to go find this ship, the Endurance. And we wanted to talk about what actually happened with the Endurance, and then also what happened with this crew that went to find the Endurance. So I'd have a question for you, Chris. Had you heard of the Endurance prior to maybe like 3 years ago? Or is this something you knew about in school?
I feel like it's something that like was in history books or something, and probably like we spent like maybe one class like period, not even a whole class period on it. It seems like something that was done. Recently, it kind of jogged back into my memory because we watched The Lost City of Z, which isn't about the Endurance, but it's about another like based off real life, true life drama about Percival Fawcett, who went to the Amazon. And there's an explorer that went with him at one point who was on one of the explorations to Antarctic with the captain of the Endurance, Shackleton, on one of his voyages. So kind of like stuff like that I watch, and then I tend to like look up Wikipedia.
Yeah.
And like, oh, what really happened? What happened here? Yeah.
Yeah. I hadn't heard of it, and if I did, I'd forgotten about it, I guess. But everybody's heard of the Titanic. You've heard of all these different ships that have gone down, and you don't hear much about this one. But we did watch a documentary about this recently, maybe 2 years ago, something like that. And my son is obsessed with ships. This kind of ship, any kind of ship wreckage or any kind of ship, really. I mean, he's recently started watching a lot about different cruise ships and wants to go on a cruise now. But he really loves ships. And it was funny because I asked him one time if he wanted to go on a cruise, a Disney cruise, and he said no, because he's watched so many of these ships go down. And in fact, he plays a lot of video games on Roblox and just some other video games that he has that where you sink ships. That's like the point of the game, and he's obsessed with it. So
now he's into championships and relationships,
all kinds of ships. That's right.
All the ships. Okay.
And so it was it was interesting, and he really got me into it and to watching these shows, watching these documentaries, and I've really enjoyed it. There's a documentary on uh, Disney Plus about Titanic. We've watched that. Of course, the movie Titanic. We watched that. But you don't see a whole lot about the Endurance. And somebody in the chat here on YouTube just said, it wasn't the Endurance part of the first National Treasure? That's a good question. I've watched that movie many times, and there is a ship on there. And it very well could.
Right.
It's no, actually, the secret is on the Charlotte. So that was the Charlotte, was it not? Okay. Charlotte has the secret, or whatever the clue was. I think that's a different ship. So they were on ice, and they did find it in ice there. So it's very similar. But I think it's and it could be that it's supposed to be the same ship, and there's not everything is exactly 1-to-1 with that movie, and that story, I guess. But
National Treasure isn't a true story.
National Treasure is not. I don't think so. I don't think there's a map on the back to the Constitution, but or Declaration of Independence, whatever. But maybe we'll find out one day. But it could be that it was that they took inspiration from the Endurance for the Charlotte.
They could have. They played loose and fast with history in that movie. Yeah. And so I can see them kind of changing it up a bit.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So anyways, if you haven't heard about the Endurance, we're going to go into all the information about the ship that we know, or a lot of information we know about, not everything. And we're going to talk about this episode on history's greatest mysteries and what exactly happened. So in 1914, we'll just get into the meat of it here. In 1914, just 2 years after the Titanic sank, if you know your dates there, I had to look that one up. But actually, I asked my son. I said, "When was it the Titanic? Was it 1912?" Yeah. But there were a group of explorers led by Sir Ernest Shackleton that were trying to make it across the Antarctic. They were trying to make the first transantarctic expedition across the land, not necessarily just in the water. They were trying to get across the land, and that seems like an impossible task, right? Especially for that time.
Oh yeah.
You think about, like, it's the early 1900s. They don't have a lot of technology. Apparently, they have video cameras, and we'll talk about that later. And they have some really good ways to make ships too, and we'll talk about that a little bit in a minute. But Shackleton wasn't your ordinary sea captain. He was an officer in the Royal Navy, and he led several expeditions to Antarctica. And the last of his, I got a kick out of this one. It was the last of his expeditions before this other one. It was called the Nimrod expedition.
Nimrod.
And that's when they discovered the magnetic pole in the volcano known as Mount Erebus. And that's, again, in the Antarctica, or in the South Pole, I guess, really. And then when he returned to England, he received several medals and was knighted Sir Ernest Shackleton. So he wasn't always Sir Ernest. He became Sir Ernest later, right?
That's one of the Ernest movies, I think, isn't it? Sir Ernest.
Sir Ernest. They should have made that.
Yeah,
I think that would have been an interesting movie.
Sir Ernest Goes to Antarctica. I think that's what it was titled.
So, Chris, what do we know about Antarctica? What's the first thing you think of when you think of Antarctica?
Penguins, really?
Penguins?
Yeah.
And seals, and it's really cold, right?
Yeah.
It's really cold. It doesn't make sense that they would want to do this. That's the one thing I keep coming back to, is like, why? Why?
Because it's there.
Because it's there. Yeah, it's just like going to the moon or going to these other planets. Like, why? You're spending all this money and effort, and most of us in our lifetime will never see the benefit of these things, right?
Yeah, I would think there'd be easier ways to get ice in 1914. I could be wrong. I don't know. I'm not sure when the refrigerator was invented.
I don't know. I mean, you think about when was the third Back to the Future, when Doc had his machine that he built that could make tea or ice or whatever it was. When was that?
Was that the 1800s?
But even then, it was like that wasn't a thing, right? He
Yeah.
made it then, so it was even maybe later. I don't know, but anyways, before we get into the story, I did want to talk about Antarctica a little bit more because I thought these were interesting facts. We've got 10 of them, so we won't draw this out too long. But number one, Antarctica holds the most of the world's fresh water, which is pretty amazing. I guess most of it is frozen.
It makes sense. There's not a lot of things there to poo in it, or to dirty it up in any way.
But it's interesting that it's fresh water, though, right? It's not
it's
ocean
not salt
water.
Yeah, it's not
right.
salt
Yeah,
water.
it's not salt water.
Which I guess makes sense because I think with salt it takes a lot. It's harder to freeze.
That's true. Yeah, good point.
So that would make sense.
Yeah. So it covers an incredible 14 million kilometers of the mountain ranges and the ice, I should say, and valleys and plateaus. It leaves only 1% of Antarctica permanently ice-free. Some areas are ice-free in the summer, including many of the areas we visit on the Antarctic Peninsula, whatever. And at its deepest, the Antarctica's ice is 4.5 kilometers or 2.7 miles thick. That's half the height of Mount Everest. That's crazy. And hopefully, that's the one of the things that's right now is everything's melting up there, right? It's warmer than it's been in millions of years. And if all of it melted, then they say that all of the world's sea levels would rise about 200 feet, which is crazy.
I mean, we still have Kevin Costner, so we'll be okay.
I know, that's what I keep thinking of is Waterworld every time somebody mentions that happening. But what I did, one of the things I didn't know is that Antarctica is actually a desert. It's like, how in the world can it be a desert if it's all water? But,
it's weird. Yeah.
But what they're talking about is it's actually just really dry. The air is just really dry there, and it actually doesn't. But it doesn't receive much precipitation. It's just really cold, and the ice just hasn't melted
or freezes.
Just no rain. There's no way for the evaporation to happen. I don't know. I don't want to get too scientific. I don't know. But,
Science.
I mean, they do get sun. They do get sun for long periods of time, but I guess it just doesn't get warm enough. Yeah. So, but it used to be warm as Melbourne, Australia, which I thought was another thing that was interesting. But that was like 40 or 50 million years ago because they found these fossils and other things that make them believe that was the case. So pretty cool. The Antarctic Peninsula is one of the most rapidly warming areas on Earth. Okay.
Well, I mean, it's the coldest. So, I mean, any little bit of warmth, I would think that would actually be pretty rapid.
Yeah.
Compared to other, I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. There's no Antarctic time zone, which is weird.
No clocks down there, so I don't think.
I guess not. I don't.
They all freeze. It doesn't matter.
They freeze. But they do have 6 months of constant daylight in the summer and 6 months of darkness in winter. Oof. That would just be really weird. Thinking about this expedition, they used that to their advantage, right? In the summer, they were able to travel longer, maybe, and with the sun on them,
With the sun out, I mean that helps to kind of help break up the ice, I guess, a little bit better because I mean, no sun, no heat whatsoever, so I would think things would be colder, so it'd probably harder to move around.
Yeah, it's probably a little more bearable, to go in the summertime. The summertime.
The summertime.
And then number 6, every way is north. So whenever you're on the South Pole, everywhere you look, every direction is north. That's really weird, though.
That makes sense.
I mean, it does, but it's like if you look to the left, it's north. I don't know. It's just weird. But
north was up.
I know, exactly. It's always up, right? Yeah. Antarctica has active volcanoes. That seems terrifying if it's like ice flying out or with lava.
Fire and ice. It's just Game of Thrones up there. You're down there.
It'd be really cool seeing it because it would, that means it's probably freezing as soon as it hits and it's making all these cool designs. But I don't know.
Yeah, that'd be kind of cool to see.
Yeah. There is a subglacial lake that flows blood red.
Oh.
That's really weird. And it's because of all the salt and oxidized iron in this one lake. And then when the oxygen comes in contact with that iron, it makes this red color, and they call it blood falls.
So inhospitable cold, volcanoes, and blood red
Sounds like the end
lake.
of the world.
Yeah, I want to go there.
Yeah.
It's like a cruise.
This one's kind of interesting. Antarctica has its own treaty. Okay, it's kind of weird, but it's one of the things it does is it has their guidelines for fishing and sealing and their mineral exploration and mining and all of that. So it's just the way they do things there. I guess I don't really get that. But anyways, number 10, diamond dust floats in the air. And this is the last one. We'll move on. So it's not really diamonds, right? It's just ice that's flying in the air, ice fog.
Mm-hmm.
And the way when the sun's shining on it, it makes it look like diamonds are floating. So that would be pretty cool to see,
That's
I think.
Cool.
This is funny. It says diamond dust is also responsible for beautiful optical phenomena like sundogs, halos, and light pillars.
Sundogs.
I don't know what that is.
Sundog?
Sundogs. So, anyways, some important facts to know about Antarctica. The main one being it's really cold there, and it's a lot of ice. For me, that was pretty big. And when Shackleton and his crew in 1914, they took their journey, and again they wanted to cross the Antarctic. I want to say tundra, but the land, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like an impossible task. I mean, everybody had to be saying, why are you doing this? This is impossible. Nobody else wanted to do it. He'd been out there several times, like we said. But the way they made their ship, and it's a wooden ship.
Yeah.
So thinking about that, you're like, it just seems like everything's stacked against them, right? Because it's a wooden ship, it's snow, it's cold, it's but they made it in a way that on the documentary they were saying it was built very well. Like they had the plans, which is interesting. And it was built really well. The wood on there was so tough because it was green that it was hard to put a nail through it.
Yeah, it is like this special kind of wood that I guess they would use for ships like this. Like it could just take punishment over and over again and not really take any damage. So yeah, it's like steel almost. It's like how strong the wood is. So I thought that was interesting.
It's crazy, and you had to make the point of it, the stern is at the front or the bow. Sorry, the bow is the front, right? They had to make it kind of at a point so that they could break through the ice, and it worked for the most part.
I also found it interesting that it's not necessarily. They said this mostly with the newer ships that they take, but I guess it's a strategy is you're not really necessarily ramming the ice,
right,
to break it. It's more you're riding up on the ice and using the weight of the ship to come down on it to break it apart and let it like float off. I thought that was kind of cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting. They knew what they were doing. He had been there several times. He knew what he was getting into. The crew knew what they were getting into. But it in the end it became too much, and we'll talk about what happened there. But even the ship that found the wreckage, the Agulhas 2, that's what Agulhas 2, their equipment failed and they got stuck at one point, right?
Yeah. So, they had a dense fog that came around them, so they couldn't necessarily see to move forward, so they had to kind of slow down, which let the ice around them to kind of to start to ice up more, like all the water started to ice up around it, so they couldn't move. And they did so what the Endurance did when that was happening was they had the crew members like run back and forth across the boat about the ship to rock it to where it would like hit the ice and break it up a little bit. Yep. Which I guess helped a little bit, but again, not as much as they hoped.
Not as much, yeah.
Yeah. But the newer ship, instead of people just running back and forth, they had this giant crane that lifted up this big gas tank.
Right.
And just like swirled it all the way, like it went like way far off the ship deck and moved it back and forth, and it rocked the ship enough to break it up so it could move again.
Yeah.
That was pretty fun to watch.
That was crazy. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because I there was one time I was in Arkansas at my in-laws' place where they have hunting land, and it's in timber and there's water, and the canal had frozen, and there was probably half an inch or a quarter inch maybe. It wasn't super thick. That was the canal was frozen, right? So we took a boat and tried to break through, just like what we're describing here. And I ended up standing with one foot on each side of the boat and rocking side to side. And we made it through. I mean, my father-in-law had a pole, and he was kind of pushing and breaking through. And then I'm sitting here rocking this thing, and I never fell. I don't know how I didn't fall. I was like, I just have to do this, because I was thinking there's no way I'm going to do this, but I had to do it because it was like my father-in-law's there, and I can't just say no, I'm not going to do this, and you do it,
So, step up for the father-in-law.
That's right. So, yeah, but it's interesting how they made it through there, how they got through there, but unfortunately, the Endurance wasn't so lucky. They weren't able to break through there in January of 1915. So they'd been going since I can't remember what date. And was it June? Yeah, it was June. No, that's not right. Sometime in 1914, they set off, right? But in 1915, in January, they got stuck. The temperatures had dropped to like below 20, I think, something like that, or 20 below. I'm sorry, I said that backwards. 20 below. So the ice,
20 is zero.
The water that was there would just refreeze. So they were breaking through, but then they started slowing down because you're not going fast anyways, right? And they just kind of got trapped in the ice. And so they got out and tried to break the ice, and and they worked for 10 months.
Yeah, just like with chisels.
Yeah.
Things like that. Just trying to chip away and break it, and it just refreeze.
Yeah. I couldn't believe that it was 10 months. I mean, just the length of time that they were actually out, and we'll get into some of that too, but they tried to get through and break the ice, but they finally had to abandon the ship in October of 1915. And in that process of them trying to break through it, the boat or the ship actually moved with the ice about 550 miles with the ice and wind. It was, to where it actually sunk.
Yeah, and I thought that was crazy because I was thinking like, well, they're stuck there.
Right.
It's frozen over. It's just gonna sink right there. But no, they're not really on land because it's not land. It's they're still on the water.
Yeah.
So they're still like the currents are still moving underneath them.
Right.
And it caused them to do almost like this clockwise, just circular motion.
Yeah.
To where it just shifted around to this other place. Yeah,
if you look at the map, there's I'll put some links in the show description, but the distance they traveled and from where they got stuck and where they ended up, it's crazy. Again, it's 550 miles. It's a long ways away, right? And it's just the whole length of the trip just amazes me. But so they said, okay, we can't do this anymore. It's starting to make all these noises that sounds like trees breaking, and it's all this cracking, creaking, and all this. So they get off the boat, they get all of their lifeboats off, they get their rations, they get their dogs, their 49 dogs and 28 men. So everybody's still alive and going at this point. But they get everything off and they put everything in the boats that they can, and they just watch the boat go down. And that's got to be pretty terrifying, right? Because you feel like that's your last hope. in some ways,
just
right?
Like that's your home sinking into the water.
But it just goes down. And we haven't really even mentioned too much, but they a lot of this is filmed, right?
I know. I thought that was crazy.
Yeah. You don't think about a lot of things being filmed in that time, or I don't, and especially something portable like that. You think of like home videos or whatever is what this felt like. And I mean, I guess they're, running the crank to do this or whatever.
A crank to it. It's going through.
Yeah.
But I thought because they were showing some pictures, I thought, oh, okay, they got a camera, and then they on the special that we watched on history, And then they started showing footage. I was like, are they recreating this?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
this looks pretty good, like for recreation. And my
Yeah.
wife was like, no, this is actually film. I was like, oh, it is, isn't it? Like that's kind of nuts.
Yeah. It was crazy. So they get out. Shackleton orders them to march over 200 miles, or that's their goal, is to get 200 miles across the ice, pull in the lifeboats, full of supplies. And this wasn't the dogs; it was the men. They were, it shows, you see pictures and videos of the men with ropes on them, and they're pulling these boats full of stuff. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It just seems ridiculous. That you're in the Arctic, or the Antarctic, I should say, and it's you're trying to go over 200 miles. Like I can't imagine going like 10 miles walking.
Yeah, and it's not like they're going to like, we just got to make it to this city
Yeah.
over the hill. Like, no, they're just going to the ocean where they're going to have more problems.
Yeah, they think they know where they are. I mean, they kind of do. They know where they are, and they know where these whaling islands are, these towns are, and they hope they can get there, right? And they're having to go through all these big chunks of ice and snow and things that are in their way, and
Yeah, because it's not flat.
it wasn't all flat.
Because the ice, like it's all, again, it's just floating on the water, so it's moving and hitting against each other and causing these like big rifts that like shoot upwards. So they're having to go over those ice, like kind of mountains almost that form out of nowhere.
It's crazy. So they can only cover about 9 miles in a week. It's just like I can imagine going 9 miles in a day, I guess, if I really had to, but that took them a week to do. So there's no way that they were going to make the 200 miles, right? I don't know. But they finally made it to Elephant Island. But before they got there, that's right. I'm sorry, I skipped a part. So before they got there, the ice started to break apart, right? They're pulling on this ice. They're on this ice. It's not land, it's ice, right? And they have to throw everything in the boats real quick because they realize that they're about to lose their ground, right? But you'd also think that would be a little bit easier, right? If you're in the water, then maybe you could row your way to somewhere and you're at least not walking.
Yeah.
But it makes it even more difficult. They're having to go over these huge waves and the wind, and it just, I'm sure it was unbearable. But they finally made it to Elephant Island, which really wasn't an ideal place to be because there's nothing there.
No.
It's just cold and yeah, nothing there. No whaling towns to see there. So they're starting to run out of food at this point. There's seals and penguins that come up, and then they have to eat their dogs.
Yeah, that was so sad.
That was really sad.
Because I mean, they showed film of the dogs, and for the most part, the dogs look like they're having a good time.
Yes.
In the bits of film that they showed,
well,
we're just running along, pulling our masters. This is great.
Well, they said that was their friends. I mean, that was like their bright thing in the whole journey, like what kept them going, and one of the things that kept them going, kept them happy, was having these dogs. 49 dogs with so they had to eat, unfortunately. One of the questions I had was like, did they eat anything else, right? And they ate the seals and the penguins, and did they eat people, and fortunately they didn't get to that point, right?
Yeah, that's good.
They made a pact, though. They said if anybody dies, we're going to eat them. Because they had to survive.
You can eat me.
They had to survive. I mean, there was, you have to do what you have to do, and who's there to tell you it's wrong, right? It's whatever it takes.
Well, it's desperation. Desperation kicks in. It's the fight or flight instinct, and you're just like, I gotta survive. To do that, I gotta eat, and I mean, Frank's dead.
Yeah.
So.
Guess
he's not going to care.
So at this point, they know there's an island to the north, I guess, or it's all north, right? I don't know.
Yeah, everything's north there.
It's over there. They know there's an island. It's not really close, but it's their best shot. There's a whaling town there, and
northwest maybe somewhere.
Yeah, it's somewhere. This is 507 days into the expedition. And that's from 1914 to now, right? And which is the little over a year, right? It's not quite 2 years yet. If I can count. Yep, I can count. Um, so they Shackleton takes 5 of his men, so 5 of his strongest men, and they get the largest lifeboat to go get help. And they traveled 800 miles through rough waters to get to South Georgia Island, and they got there on day 521. So it took them almost 20 days to get in a lifeboat to get to this island.
Yeah, that's nuts.
It's crazy. So even then they got to the island, but then they had to travel 30 more miles.
Yeah.
And it took them 3 days, but they found people. And nobody could believe the story. It's like, what are you thinking? Like, why did you do this?
You went there on purpose. Okay.
Yeah. Nobody does that. Just have some whale blubber.
Keep you warm.
But they talked some people into it, and they took 3 different attempts in 3 different boats to try to get back to Elephant Island to get it to rescue his crew. At this point, he doesn't know if they're alive or dead. They couldn't talk on cell phones or anything. So.
To me, I mean, it's like it speaks like volumes to Shackleton. Like he could have like just got to the whaling town and be like, okay, like I am done.
I'm so tired.
Like they're that way. Can you guys just go get them? But he went back with them. Like he actually like went back for his crew. Like he set sail on a little raft. They didn't know if they even make it to that island. Got there, 30 miles walking over there. Gets in like, hey, we gotta go back and get them. So let's like, turn around.
The boats were from the boats and crews were from 3 different countries. And it's wild that there were all these different people there, and were willing to help too. But they had to turn around, I guess, the two first times, but 2 first attempts. But on day 635, so remember he got to South Georgia Island on day 521. But on day 635, he gets in, and this is in 1916 at this point. So they originally left in 1914, on the original journey. This is 1916, so 2 years from then, almost 2 years. He finally gets back to Elephant Island and finds that his entire crew, all 22 that remained at this island, were still alive.
Yeah, and in the documentary they were saying like as they were approaching before they even got to the island, he like stood up and started like trying to count the heads.
There's 1, there's 2, there's
1, 2, 3, 4, 22.
Yes, we did it. You didn't do nothing. You left us. But that's the thing is like they respected him more than anybody else. They respected him a ton. They called him the boss. They followed him, and it kept them alive. I mean, this guy was had all these medals. He'd done all these things. They knew that if they could follow him, and I mean that was their only shot. I mean, what else are you going to do? But at the same time, it's like they kept calling. They called him the boss. Whatever the boss says. And man, can you imagine them? They're like, that long a time, over 100 days, that they're just sitting there. It's like, oh, is that him? Nope, that's just a wave.
What do you want to do today? Who wants to build a snowman?
Yeah. And again, this whole time they're eating seals and penguins, right? Because they probably, sadly gone through all the dogs. I hate that.
Happy Feet was a much different movie.
They had happy feet when they saw penguins.
Their heart songs just came out and he showed up.
Yeah. So it's amazing. I mean, again, if you look at the map of how far they traveled and to go all the way up to this other island where these whalers are and where they tried to get to, I mean, it's just unreal. I can't wrap my head around how they did this, how they were able to survive in the 1900s, in the early 1900s. I mean, just thinking about all the technologies and skills that we have today and what they didn't have, and I just can't wrap my head. And just for the simple fact that the next crew that actually did this actually made it all the way across. It wasn't until like 1958, I think, when there was a crew that made it across, and they had aerial reconnaissance. There was like a helicopter or something, I'm sure, and they had snowmobiles and all these things, to help them. And they made it across the Antarctic. Yay.
Yeah, I know it gets cold and snows here in Texas, and I'm like, I'm not going outside.
Yeah, yeah.
And I have like nice like modern day jackets that are supposed to keep you like super warm now. They have like
I don't know what they had.
Fleece.
I mean, yeah, they had. I'm sure it was animal fur of some sort, and probably. Just animal fur. And maybe there's blubber or something that's supposed to be super warm. I don't know what you do with it, but
just roll around it.
I don't know, but so anyways, back to the documentary. So the documentary followed the Agulhas 2. Agulhas. I keep saying it wrong. Agulhas 2. And it was a ship that was built for this type of weather and conditions. It came from Africa, I think, and Cape Town or something. But I thought it was pretty interesting that its engines allowed it to move at a blistering 7 miles per hour, cutting through 3 meters of ice. So that's 9 feet, if my math is correct, right? Of ice, 9 feet of thick ice that's breaking through. And they get stuck. Like this ship it's got so much more technology and so much more going for it that they even got stuck.
Can't fight Mother Nature.
You can't fight Mother Nature. In fact, so the reason they took the trip when they did, and this was 3 years ago when they did the first trip, and then when they had the first I guess documentary about this that I saw. But it and I just lost my train of thought. But they took this journey, and they ended up getting stuck at one point, and they have this little AUV or submarine that would go down and could explore. They were able to find where they thought the wreckage would be, about what did they say, 1,200 miles away. They had a way of, or was it that right? That doesn't sound right, but from a far distance, they were able to determine it's over there. So they knew where they were going. They went to this part, and there's this part in the ocean floor that just goes down really deep. And they said that's where it's going to be. It goes down about 10,000 feet. It's got to be there. Yeah. And
they had a lot of problems.
They did
with their mechanical bits, like that. Yeah, the AUV thing that was the torpedo one, right? They like shot out like out the back of it, like drop the kid off at the pool.
Yeah,
and that one, like, there's no tether to this thing. It's just going out, and it's supposed to come back.
Yeah,
and it didn't come back.
Did it run out of battery, or just the pressure got to it? And it quit or something?
I don't know. That was a little confusing. Exactly what happened. They said it only had a certain amount of battery life.
Yeah.
And before that happened, though, they lost contact with it. Mm-hmm. And it could have been the cold. It could have been the depth or whatever. So they had another kind of rover thing that they were going to be using to actually explore the wreckage when they found it.
Right.
And so they pinpointed where the AV was, and they sent this thing down to get it. And they have video of trying to like grasp it with it's like a thing underwater, and it keeps missing. They finally get it, and they get it back up to the ship, only to find out the thing that they're supposed to use to explore the wreckage, the housing, this like metal housing that contains basically the brains of this thing, just imploded from the pressure of being down that deep. Yeah, I mean, it's like a thick metal thing if you watch it, and it's just like it just crumpled like it was paper. Like, and so they couldn't use that.
You don't want to go down that far.
No, you would not survive. Yeah, I mean, even if you get past all the cold, the pressure will kill you.
Right. Yeah. So, needless to say, we won't ever have trips down to see it, probably, at least in our lifetime.
No, I don't think so.
I think it would be really cool to see it, though.
I mean,
because so at this point, again, in the documentary, they had to give up. They had to turn back because they're like, okay, our sub isn't working. We need this thing to be able to see everything, so to do the exploration. So this is like 3 years ago. And then 3 years later, which it was earlier this month, they went back out there, and this is March of 2022. They went back out, and they knew where they were going this time. They went straight towards it, and they found it. And it's so funny in the documentary because it was like it's all about what happened 3 years ago, and then at the very end, for 2 minutes, they say they found it.
Yeah,
no pictures.
No pictures, no footage. I have a feel. I don't know if this is exactly what happened. So I feel like history kind of helped fund the one 3 years ago with the film crew and stuff.
Right.
And so they had all that footage for that one, but they didn't for the second time they went. And they actually found it.
Right.
And so they legally didn't have any right to the footage to show it. More than likely another company. I think BBC News, I think they have the footage.
I think
if you
so.
Want to watch it. So maybe them or another. They had funding from other people for this second one.
For sure.
Because even the rover thing that they put in the water to go down looked completely different.
Yeah.
Than the first one.
So the documentary, again, it just ends, and they're like, they did it, and it's over. And then, so what you have to do is you go and search Shackleton's Endurance and found or something like that, and you can find all these videos, and it's fascinating because they found the ship in almost perfect condition. Like it looks like, I mean, when you see the videos of it going down, because again, you can see the footage that they had, and it looks all crumpled, right? Because but it's all still together because it's all held together by ropes. Because basically the masts and the things that hold the sails up, so the masts and all that, those were all crumpled, but they were all still together with the ropes, right? But it went down, and all of that pressure slowed it down, I'm sure, so that it just kind of stayed together. And
it did. I think they said like the front of it, you can see where it had hit the bottom, and so it kind of crumpled there a little bit. But like for the most part, it looked pretty much like the last video of it that they saw.
Which is, it's crazy. And there, there's not a lot of bacteria and animals that eat wood in the ocean.
Some kind of sea worm or something that they talked about.
They talked about a sea worm, the mollusk or whatever that eats wood. The what they call it, a shipworm or something like that.
Yeah, like a shipworm. It just eats through everything and anything, and just quickly.
Yeah, but it's too cold and there's too much pressure there, right? So that's why it didn't get destroyed. That's why it's still like that. But it's pretty remarkable to see that footage. It reminds me of when they found the Titanic, those videos, and I'm hoping there's more footage because what I've seen, you can kind of see some things, and maybe there's not a whole lot because it is so deep and there is so much pressure. But they talked about seeing crockery and clothing and things.
Yeah, like boots, and you could see into the porthole where the captain's like quarters were.
Yeah.
And of course, the back of the ship with the word Endurance was still there with like a big star under it. Looked like perfect.
Yeah. I mean, and that the name of that ship is just perfect for this, right? It endured, and that crew endured all of this, So it's just amazing. I mean, I can't imagine A, wanting to do something like that, and B, making it across. Surviving all that they went through. So that's the story of the Endurance. Again, they found it recently. So one of the questions I had for you is, do you think it's time for a movie now, that more people need to hear this story?
Oh yeah, I'm sure that, especially now that they found it and that it's been all over TV, history made a documentary of it. I'm sure movie studios are just scrambling to get the rights for this. Yeah.
I did a Google just to make sure that there wasn't a movie already, and there is something that comes up on IMDb, but it's still just a documentary. Shackleton's Endurance, I think is what it's called. But and they've got tons of footage. I mean, it's just waiting to be written, right? The movie and to be filmed, really. And it seems like it should have already been done at this point, but I think it's just going to make that all happen. Like you said, movie makers are just chomping at the bit to get this done because
I'm sure, yeah.
There's some color footage of what that ship looks like, right? And that helps a ton. You know, that's because you think about with Titanic, and if you watch the documentary on the Titanic, they actually saw a lot of it. You know, I guess did they see it before though, or after the movie? I can't remember with that one. They mentioned it in that particular documentary because it was with James Cameron.
Yeah.
But I was thinking actually they saw it later because they found out that there were some things that were not correct later on. But anyways, it gives them a lot of things to think about and to do. I was excited to do this deep dive into it. So I was really interested and almost did a quiz about other famous sunken ships, you know, but it's like none of us would have known any of these, so I was like, we'll just.
Well, that could be even more fun.
But it's really interesting to see those kind of things, and there's all kinds of shows like that on History and whatever other channels there are that do that nowadays. It's like I was going to say TLC or something like that, but I don't know that they do that kind of stuff anymore. But whatever channel Destination Truth is on, I bet they.
Yeah, Discovery.
Which is it Discovery? Okay. So that stuff is always interesting to me.
You wrote a question down here. I'm just going to throw it in your face. Who do you think should play Shackleton?
Oh, yeah.
In the movie.
Who should play Shackleton? I don't know, man. I'm trying to think. Let me look. I've got a picture of what he looks like. Let's see if we can figure out a good match for him.
I looked him up.
Yeah.
As well. For our viewers watching that.
Yeah. Man, I don't know. I'm terrible at this. I meant to ask you that because I'm not good with actor names.
So my few thoughts. First, I just thought just before I saw the picture, I was like, just manly man. You would be a manly man that could take this on or whatever. And I thought John Hamm.
Okay. Yeah.
Or Madman, because he just seems like he could survive the Antarctic. But then looking at him a little bit, I was like, oh, maybe Ewan McGregor.
Yeah.
I could pull that off. Or possibly, I gotta look this guy up because I don't remember his name.
While you're doing that, he kind of has some bulgy kind of eyes, and he reminds me of, and I can't think of his name. I'm gonna get hate email for this, but the Green Goblin on Spider-Man.
Oh,
what is his?
William Dafoe.
William Dafoe. Yeah.
I kind of thought William Dafoe at first a little bit. If it but he's older now.
He's too old. That was my thought too.
A little too old.
Yeah.
But
and then I thought Robert Redford too, but he's too old. So.
I think he played Scarecrow of Batman Begins, Cillian Murphy.
Okay.
I think that's a good kind of likeness to him, and a good actor for him.
Yeah, there's some other pictures on that article that you were looking at there that he's got a beard and he's got a hat, and he looks a bit different than he did in that other photo of him. But in 1909, but
put a beard on him. He's a completely different person.
So he died. Let me see if I can find that real quick. His final years. He returned to England in 1917 and found out that the war he heard about just before leaving had grown into the First World War. Man, I mean, they missed part of that, right? But he organized another. And so in 1919, we even talked about this. So he organized another expedition to the Antarctic just a few years later after getting back. So apparently he didn't have enough of it. But he ended up on South Georgia Island again. But they didn't make it. They had to turn around, I guess. But he died at the age of 47, which really he wasn't that old, I guess. That's I'm 44. It's not very old.
Yeah.
But he died in 1922 on January 5th. But
Wow.
that's pretty crazy.
Mm-hmm.
They called him the boss, but he's definitely someone to look up to and to aspire to be like. Just to not give up. I don't want to get all cheesy on us. But,
Oh yeah. Oh, the gumption.
Yeah.
Gumption.
Pretty interesting. And then, like I said, there was the next group to actually make it across was in 1958, and then the next group after that was in 1981. So not many people have been able to do it. So
I wouldn't think a lot of people would want to specifically, but yeah.
I don't get the point. But I'm sure. I mean, the thing is, if you can get out to these remote places like this and really research and look at how deep the ice is and figure out how, did it melt? Did it refreeze? Did it all do this? And you can find these fossils and different things. It's pretty interesting, and you can kind of learn about what could happen in the future. But and I think that's part of it. And I said earlier, it's like, why do people go to the moon? Why do they go to Mars? Well, some of it is like, what if this Earth we're on is inhabitable or whatever, uninhabitable? I can't say it. What if we have to leave? Are these other places any good? And so I mean that there's some value to that. But some of it I feel like it's just like, why not? Let's just go. Let's spend all this money.
Yeah, and they spent a lot of money to do this. I forget how much it was, but it's in the millions.
I'm sure. And that's crazy. And because they're not doing it necessarily for science to look at the ice and all this stuff. They were looking for this ship because nobody else had found it.
Yeah.
Okay. And the thing is, it's a monument now that nobody can touch it. Nobody can bring anything up. You can't go snooping around in it. No, you couldn't anyways because it's so deep. But it's a monument, and I'm sure there will be other expeditions and people will get more footage of it because again, you can look and not touch it. But you just got to have the right technology and the right kind of equipment to get down that deep. It'd be interesting down the road, like, because they keep talking about how everything's melting, all this stuff, whatever. We're not going to get political or anything like that here, but if it does, what if it did melt, right? It would be super interesting to know if that would of course the sea level would rise, so it's not going to get any shallower. but what if it like floated up, and that'd be interesting. We'll never see that, but I'd love to see more inside of it, and just to see that. So it's just fascinating.
Yes.
So, all right. Well, that's all of our show we have today. We want to thank you for listening to episode 231. And if you are on social media, you can find us on YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter, and Facebook. Just look for I Am Geek Show. You can also join our Facebook group, which is I Am Geek, I Am Group. And if you're watching us on Facebook or YouTube, you can listen to this and all of our other episodes wherever you listen to podcasts, and whether that be Apple, Google, or Stitcher, or Spotify, or Amazon, wherever. And if you can't remember any of this that I've just said, then you can go to iamgeekshow.com and you can find links to that, plus links to previous shows and to all of our different social media. Be sure to come back next week and listen to the episode or see us online. We have another I Am Disney episode with Sarah and Steven of Princess and Scoundrel. And we'll talk Disney and Star Wars. So we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.